Hi, everyone. This is Bailey Liu with Washington State Charter Schools Association. I'm your host for the Fundraising Learning Series, where I bring in experts to talk about equity-driven fundraising practices. Today, I sit down with Jason McGill to talk about how he navigates fundraising in his roles as executive director and a board member. And Jason McGill is a community advocate rooted in justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion work. Currently, he serves as the executive director of Northwest Youth Services, a nonprofit serving young people experiencing homelessness in Whatcom and Skagit counties. He's also a board member at Bellingham's first public charter school, Whatcom Intergenerational High School. I'm so excited to have him here. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself and share why you decided to join the WIHS board.
So a little bit about myself. I'm from the East Coast and I decided to move to the West Coast back in 2012. Long story short, I found my journey, move up here to Bellingham. I just got connected to Whatcom Intergenerational High School through a community partner. And when I learned about their mission and just how they wanted to cultivate an environment of learning that was very rooted in justice, not just justice, but also indigenous ways of knowing, of learning. It just speaks to how I really view everything about learning and how my own schooling coming up in public education was really rooted in just Western philosophy. And Whatcom Intergenerational High School is the opposite. It's really focused on indigenous ways of like learning and building community. And that really speaks to everything that I really am passionate about. So that's really why I wanted to join the board.
I really appreciate just the passion that you bring to this work. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your role as executive director. How do you approach fundraising differently wearing a board member hat and then also executive director hat?
I love this question because there's definitely a difference in just how you approach it. From an executive director seat, you're really focused on the day-to-day stuff, and you understand like exactly where the line items where you need to fundraise for. Whereas the board, you just have a general understanding of the overall budget. You don't have the day-to-day details. Your responsibility is really relying on the executive director, and if there's like a development director or someone in that position, you kind of lean on more on those folks.
What tools do you need in both of these roles to effectively fundraise?
From the board seat, it's more about making sure that you have the big picture budget overview, whereas some of the tools that you would need as an executive director, you need to make sure that you have a strong fundraising team to kind of tackle the logistics. And I would say that's another difference between being on the board as opposed to being, as an executive director, is that on the staff side, you have to focus on the logistics. Where on the board side, you're just trying to hit a number. Your focus is really trying to hit the number that we all agreed that we needed to hit to ensure that we generated that revenue. So some of the tools as an executive director, you have to understand the team around you and understanding like if you are going to create a fundraiser event, what are you putting out there and what is your return? And that's really important for the executive director to understand. As opposed to the board, you're really just focused on getting that number.
Absolutely. What I'm hearing is as an executive director, we're really responsible for the revenue and oversee that. And as a board member, you're really thinking about governance. And I also appreciate just your deep commitment to dismantling systemic inequity. And we both can agree that the current funding structure is problematic. So fundraising often requires us to paint this very dire picture of the community, right? And it can further marginalize the community we serve. So how do we engage with funders and donors in a way that can support our organization's work authentically while centering the needs of the community?
It's a really hard question for nonprofits in particular, right? Because you understand that you have to generate enough revenue to do the work that you're setting out to do. And sometimes it's hard to do that when you know that whomever your target population is, or whatever your revenue or fundraising model is, you understand like your client base. Sometimes you got to compromise the revenue, meaning you have to get that revenue with some type of tangible thing that's going to come attached to that revenue in order to achieve your goal of serving. And that can be very conflicting at times, because it's easy for someone to come in and say, hey, I'll give you $100,000 if you do this, but I need this. But whatever those stipulations are, sometimes could be harmful to the young person or your target population, because you won't be able to meet that outcome. So it's like being realistic, but also recognizing like you still need to generate revenue.
I think that's always a challenge, right? Like we have to grapple with all the time, every day. And so what ideas do you have for us to move away from those transactional relationships, to engage donors more holistically?
How do we move away from transactional relationships with donors? To me, it's really about the relationship first. So how do you cultivate this really authentic relationship with each donor, in a way that they understand this is an investment in the agency, which ultimately will produce positive outcomes for whatever your mission is. And in particular for Northwest Youth Services and Welcome Intergenerational High School, the outcomes are to serve youth and to make sure that there's a learning environment that is very holistic for those youth and young people. So you want to make sure that the donors get connected to that first. And once you have them connected to what you're trying to do, what we're trying to do, then from there, it's easy to me. It's like, hey, we need an investment for this or that, or a lot of nonprofits have these annual events to raise X amount of dollars. So it's like, how do we get people connected to that in a way that's still honoring the relationship? And again, to me, it starts with just being out there, talking to folks, having coffee with people. I love coffee, so I always meet people for coffee, and we just have a really honest conversation about the mission, about who we are as individuals, where both sides live with values and things like that. So it's really important to me. And I think that's a really good way to move away from transactional to more of a relational and investment type of model.
I am so glad you said that, because absolutely, fundraising is about the relationship. And then the second piece you brought up is that aligned values. So I appreciate that. What are 3 pieces of advice that you would like to share with our leaders and board members, that they continue to grapple with these complex issues and make a commitment to fundraise equitably?
Well, it's hard to do this for a lot of folks, and the one advice that I have is stay true to your mission. Go after donors that are aligned with your mission, your values as an agency. I say it's hard to do that because you still need to generate the revenue, but if your revenue is coming from sources that are are still causing harm in the end, it doesn't make sense to continue to perpetuate that. So it's like, how do you figure out ways that you can stay true to your mission while also generating the revenue that you need to generate? And it can be done. It's a slower process. It's not a quick process, but it can be done if you stay true, rooted in your mission, which is why mission statements are really, really important. And I know that, nowadays they're kind of watered down, but if you can revamp your focus and really rally your entire staff body, your board around that mission, the impact that we could have in each of our communities it's going to be substantial and incredible and transformative. So that's one piece of advice. Be prompt is another one, meaning you have to ensure that you're following up with folks, and you're responding to folks regardless, that they're, even if they're saying hi, respond to them, be prompt about that response. So, hey, thanks for reaching out. It's a quick hello, because that being prompt speaks to the relationship side, building that relationship and sustaining that relationship that you need to have with each donor. And another piece of advice I would have is share the impact, share what is happening, how their investments are translating into an actual impact. And For Wacom Intergenerational High School, it would be, for an example, the impact would be how the graduation rate, you know, your investment as a donor, you were able to ensure that we served X amount of youth and they graduated, and now they're moving on to higher education or trade school, whatever their passions are, that they want to go into as young people. So again, stay true to your mission, be prompt, and share the impact. 3 important components.
I love this. Thank you so much for sharing your advice with us. I wonder what resources and thought leaders you would recommend for us to continue our learning.
Yes, one huge reading that has impacted my leadership in the nonprofit world is The Revolution Will Not Be Funded by Insight. And The Revolution Will Not Be Funded is really a book that's made up of different essays from very prominent folks out there in the communities that are really doing the work, not just in a theoretical world, but also practical world. The reason why that's important is because for nonprofit leaders and staff and board members, if you understand the nonprofit world, there is this thing, they call it the nonprofit industrial complex. It is so real because, again, we get so caught up in our, we need to generate X amount of dollars to do this or do that we lose focus of our mission, or we lose focus on why we're doing this work in the first place. And that's so critical. And after reading that book a couple of times, but I'm rereading it with the staff body that I work at here, it separates saviorism or enabling young people to stay within the systems, moving them to and partnering with them to understanding like their traumas are because of the system. And that is really, really important for people to understand that it's not them. They're just victims. We're all just victims within this larger system. And that nonprofit industrial complex, The Revolution Will Not Be Funded, speaks to that. They break it down. It's like, wow, oh my gosh. Like I've been complicit in this whole nonprofit world thinking I'm doing something really, really powerful, when in the end, I'm just perpetuating it. And it's not that people aren't doing really wonderful and critical work in the communities, but if you don't understand what you're doing and how you're doing it, and ultimately, where is that leading your target population to, you're pretty much doing a disservice to not only yourself, but the people that you're serving. So if you understand that, if we can create a community that really understands what the nonprofit world is and why it even like became a thing in the US, wow, we can really create some change in all of our communities.
Thank you so much, Jason. This has been such an important conversation, and I just appreciate you for bringing these complex structural and systemic issues to the table, and then also providing solutions and what we can do to take action. At the end of the day, it is about creating change for a better community, better outcomes, and a better world. So I appreciate you so much, and thank you so much for your time.
Definitely. Thank you, Bailey, for like inviting me to the table and wanting to hear my voice. And yeah, it's tough work, but we can definitely create a community that is transformative, so long as we, again, stay rooted in our missions.